Okay, everyone, welcome back. Good afternoon. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, we just have about 4 minutes until class time, 2:20. So for now, anyway, get comfortable and ready to take some notes. Hope you had a good weekend. I'll be right with you guys in 4 minutes to get things rolling. One second, I'm just gonna get a little beverage here. It's like a real mug of water, huh? Hi, Philip. How's it going? It's good. I had a nice weekend. I watched some of the Super Bowl on Sunday. Guess it was a little bit of a disappointing game in the sense it wasn't the closest game. And then I was judging in this academic competition for high school kids, the National High School Ethics Bowl on Saturday. I was a judge, so that was kind of interesting and fun. I got hooked up with that by a colleague from Chapman University. So yeah, quite active and busy weekend, but it was fun. I had some time also to just kind of do some workouts and just kind of relax. So no complaints. All right, everybody. Well, we'll be getting things going in about a minute. So happy Tuesday there, Alex. Good to see you. Is it Taco Tuesday? I live right next door to like a pretty good Mexican food restaurant, so I might have to get that tonight. Hi, Janae. Okay, just a moment. Okay, guys, it's more or less now 2:20, so I'm going to let us get underway. Thanks again for being here and for attending and just making the class interesting and cool. Hope you all had a good weekend. Enjoyed the Super Bowl if you had a chance to watch it. I watched some. I didn't really have a rooting interest in either of the teams. I was just hoping for a good game, so it was a little anticlimactic. But I always like seeing the halftime show and all the funny commercials. Saturday, I think if any of you just arrived to the meeting, I was saying a few moments ago that I was one of the judges in the National High School Ethics Bowl competition. So like different high school teams basically try and present some kind of analysis and evaluation of an ethical topic and an ethical dilemma. Like in one case, they were talking about if a person was ever incarcerated and spent time in prison, do they have an obligation morally to tell that to someone new that they're dating early on in the dating relationship? Another case, if you believe factory farming is wrong, do you have a moral obligation to no longer consume those products? And in another case, it was like, does the United States have an obligation to protect user data against certain apps and sites like TikTok or whatever? So it was kind of interesting. I was a judge, and I was part of 3 different rounds of competition for them. Anyway, though, I'm happy to be back with you guys, and it's Tuesday, February the 9th. This is 2:20 p.m., so we're really getting going. Anybody that's here, that's present at the meeting, go ahead and if you can, just chime into the chat here. Just give a little comment. It could be hello or just good afternoon. That way I know that you're present, and that's my little informal attendance record that I'm keeping. Also, if you have a name, a screen name that's different from the name on the roster, then just go ahead and mention your name in the comments so I know that you're getting your mark for being present at the meeting. Okay, well, what we're going to do then is just continue where we left off last time. I'm going to start off by kind of reviewing some of the major points that we discussed at the previous lecture. And after we're done with all that review, I've got some more notes to give you guys on deductive and inductive arguments. We're going to learn about the difference between those 2 main types of argumentation and reasoning. So good to see everybody. And hi, Anna, Ryan, well, Tan, actually, Levy, Jordan, Lan, Oliver, Matt, Stephen, Elizabeth, Brittany, and all the rest. Appreciate you guys' attendance as usual, and let's try and make sure to be consistent and steady throughout the semester, and we'll all be on the same page and good to go. All right, then. So first thing I want to just go back into as we review the notes from last meeting. Let's get started with this. Who knows or can say what is it when a person is a good critical thinker? Our whole class is based around trying to become better critical thinkers. So let's just go back into that for a brief moment. What do you remember about what a good critical thinker is? What type of person is that? What's the basic description of such a person? Let me know. What is that? A good critical thinker. Has evidence to support their claim. Okay, very good, Janae. That's one of the 2 parts of the concept. So a good critical thinker, when they make a claim to another person, they make sure that they can back it up with good evidence or argument. So they don't just make claims boldly without being able to supply proof, reasons, or justification. That's one important point. Philip, you're kind of mentioning the other one, which you just say as being skeptical. Yes, to say it in a more full, detailed way, it's the kind of person that does not believe things without a good basis. Good, Joa. So it's the type of person who would not believe a claim or a piece of information unless it was based on or supported by good evidence or good arguments. Okay, so I see a few more comments coming in. Someone who doesn't buy into things without there being solid evidence or argument. Good, correct. Remy. A person that does not believe in claim that doesn't have evidence. Also good. And hi, Matthias. I see you there. And welcome to class. So yeah, we're trying to be the good critical thinkers, those people that don't believe things unless there's good evidence and reasons, and that make good evidence and reasons to support our own claims when we're on the delivering side of that transaction. Bad critical thinkers are just the reverse. These are the type of people who believe claims and information that are not based on any kind of solid evidence or argument. So they just believe things for no good reason, basically, and also lack the ability to defend their positions and claims with evidence and argumentative support. So we want to be good critical thinkers. If you're not, you're going to lose. You're going to be at a disadvantage because you're going to be manipulated, exploited, taken advantage of by all kinds of people who know that those that are not good at critical thinking will buy into whatever argument or even weak or poorly stated claim that they present them with. And so, you know, it's a competitive world. Some people want to make money off of you. Some people want to take advantage of you in ever so many different ways. So you want to be able to think clearly and rationally as a good critical thinker. That's the main goal here. Okay, so afterwards we talked about what arguments are. We say that good critical thinkers can deliver good arguments and they can evaluate another person's argument. But what is an argument? So let's go into that. I'm speaking about an argument in the formal sense as we define it in logic. So a little hint to remind you is that it's a set of certain things, but a set of what? And maybe you can give me those basic details. What's the definition of an argument? Let's know. So far we're just reviewing from material that was covered last time, just to bring us back onto the topic after the weekend. My question now is, what is an argument? Just let me know what an argument is. A set of, and then fill in the blank from there. Okay, so good. Make sure it's not actually Alex, it's Lan. Okay, but Lan, an argument is a set of two or more sentences where one of the sentences is the conclusion and all the others are premises. Very good. Stephen, you said sentences with conclusions and premises. Yes, correct, but a little more detail could be given, giving like the number of things that there have to be. So every argument is a combination of two or more sentences. The reason that there have to be two or more is because every argument has one conclusion and at least one premise. There could be one, two, or more premises, but there has to be at least one. So there's no such thing as an argument, which is just one statement sitting there by itself. If I tell you that Tom Brady is the greatest football player or something, I don't know, that's not an argument. It could be that someone makes an argument for that position, but it's not an argument because it's not based on any evidence that was stated in the argument. So to have an argument, you have to have at least one premise that backs the conclusion. Okay, now in your comment, Matthias, you say one or more sentences that make one or more claims and defend said claims with evidence. I would have to correct one thing about that. There's only one claim. It's not claims, plural. There's only one claim that's being made by the argument, and that's the conclusion. The premises are support for the conclusion. So each argument is directed at exactly one conclusion, so it's not like an argument tries to convince you of multiple claims all at once. Then Remy, a set of two or more sentences that has a conclusion and the others are premises. All right, good. So like, for example, say I had this argument here. John's blood was on the murder weapon. John's shoe print was found at the crime scene. So therefore, let's say John is the killer. So I'm just writing an example of an argument on the board so that we can kind of focus on the definition that we mentioned here. This is an argument, just as an example, and it's written in standard form. The standard form of an argument, let's try to remember, is when you display it like this, with the conclusion at the bottom, a horizontal line is placed above the conclusion, and then the premises are listed above that line in a list. And the premises have to occur on separate lines, so that it can't be that both premises are on the same horizontal line. When one premise statement ends, we go down to the next available ledger line and add a new premise statement. Okay, so I've got more questions. When you make an argument, you're trying to, what about the conclusion? What's the whole point of the argument? It's to, let me give you this question. What's the definition of the conclusion? The conclusion of the argument is the statement, the sentence that you are trying to what? The conclusion of the argument is the sentence, well, that you're trying to, you say support. That's one way to put it, yes. Another way to put it, it's the sentence that you're trying to reach. I like that also. But I was going more in the direction of prove. You're trying to prove it. You're trying to show that it is true, okay? Yes, so you want to prove this conclusion. You're trying to persuade, convince, demonstrate that the conclusion is true. So suppose I'm, a lawyer, and I'm trying to convince this jury that John over there, the defendant, is guilty. Now I'm making a legal argument based on evidence found at the crime scene. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I want to ask this question before I mention this. What is the premises of an argument? The premises, what is their role? So the conclusion is what you're trying to prove to be true. And the premises are what? What's their relationship to the conclusion? Let me know. Okay, good. Yeah, so the premises support the conclusion, and they can be described as, let me see the comment, the reasons are the evidence that support the conclusion. Correct. Very good, guys. So that is the function of premises. Premises are reasons and evidence that are given to support and back up the conclusion. Okay, so in this case, John is the killer is the statement that someone's trying to show is true. They're trying to prove this. And they give this as their evidence. They're not just saying he's the killer. I don't know why. I just feel like he is. They're saying, well, he's the killer, and here are the reasons. His blood was on the murder weapon, and investigators also saw a shoe print that matches his foot at the crime scene. So therefore, we conclude that John is the killer. Okay? There's no such thing as an argument with only one statement inside. If I say to you that Tom Brady's the greatest football player, that's not an argument by itself because it didn't come packaged with evidence or premises. You could give the reasons if you wanted to make that argument, and of course people do make that argument. You could say, like, for example, he won 7 Super Bowls, he appeared in the Super Bowl 10 times, he's still playing great at age 43 after 21 years, therefore he's the greatest player. I'm not saying I agree with that argument or its conclusion, but people can make such arguments if they want to try and prove that that claim is true. Then they derive, evidence for it, and then they justify their claim by the evidence. Okay, so good critical thinkers back their views and beliefs up with evidence and arguments. They don't just say things without the ability to tell you why they think that's true or why it should be considered to be true. So we want to be those good critical thinkers that rely on arguments when we present claims and also expect to hear a good argument before we're going to be convinced of someone else's claim. Now, as I just said, the whole point of argument, the whole point of making these arguments is to prove that the conclusion is what? Let me get that word again in the chat. We're out here trying to show what about the conclusion when we make arguments? It's a simple word, but it's complex in meaning. Nonetheless, what is it? We're trying to prove, show, demonstrate, persuade that the conclusion is, okay, so one person says is a fact. And another person says is true. Yes, so I was thinking of true, but fact and truth are kind of the same. So you're trying to show that the conclusion is true. That's the point. That's the goal that you're motivated by when you make the argument. You want to show that the conclusion is true. So I have a question then that spins off from there. We talked about this last Thursday. Let's go over it again. What does it mean for a sentence to be true? Tell me that. What's the definition of a true statement or sentence? What has to happen for a sentence to bear truth? Let me know this. When is a sentence true? Let's see. Okay, so when it represents or matches reality, that's correct. A statement, a sentence is true if it says of what is real, that it is real. So sentence is true when whatever it says matches the real facts. Let me give you some examples that I hope are pretty clear. One statement that's a fact is I'm wearing a watch. It's true. There it is. I am wearing this watch. If I told you, why is it a true statement? Because it's a fact. There is one on my wrist. Now, if I told you I was wearing a scarf, that's not true. I mean, I'm saying it, but you can tell there's no scarf on my neck. So whether the sentence is true or not depends on whether what one says in the sentence matches the reality of the world. So the objective facts determine whether a given statement is true or not. If I told you that I was, born in the 50s, I'm lying, or I'm just telling you something not correct, something untrue, that's false. So the world has a set of facts, and if you say of those facts that they are, then you're speaking the truth. Otherwise, you say something false. Telling you that, I don't know, that I'm wearing a hat is just an incorrect, false statement. So just reminding you guys of what truth is all about. Sometimes people think truth has to do with having evidence, but Not really. You can have something that's true that no one can prove or nobody knows. Like take, for example, someone keeps a secret and they've not revealed it to anybody else. They know the truth, but nobody else has any knowledge of it, nor could they prove it. But a fact remains true whether or not it's understood or whether anyone has the evidence to show it or not. Okay, so we make arguments in an effort to prove, show, demonstrate that a conclusion is true. In other words, that it matches what's real. What about belief? Let me ask that question. What is to have a belief in a sentence or a statement? We're just going back over our notes from last lecture, but I want to be clear. What is a belief? To have a belief in a sentence means what? So truth is when the sentence matches reality, yes. Belief, though, is when you just think that the sentence is true. Okay, very good. Suppose that you're in the jury and you're asking this question as you're deciding how to vote, whether to convict or say not guilty. You're trying to figure out, do I believe the case being made that this person really is the killer? Now, if you say he's guilty, then I guess you think they proved it and that's true. On the other hand, you might say, I was not convinced by the lawyer's presentation of evidence and arguments, and in my mind, there's still room to doubt whether or not John really was the killer. And so that other person doesn't think so. They'd have different beliefs. You could have juror A and juror B. A says, I believe that John did it, and B says, I don't believe that he did it. Okay, and that's just one example. We can have different beliefs about the same question. One person could believe aliens exist, another person can believe no, they don't. One person can believe that the election was stolen, another person can believe it was absolutely not stolen. So when you believe a sentence, you, the individual, decide that you believe, I shouldn't use the word again, but you're deciding that you think it's true, okay? Beliefs have to do with your point of view on what's true and false, but truth itself just has to do with reality and the facts. So something doesn't just become true because you believe it, but hopefully you believe something because it is true, if that makes sense. Okay, so just a couple more points to review. I also mentioned to you guys last time that there are different types of sentences. Okay, so one main type of sentence is the assertoric sentence. Assertoric sentences are just any sentence that has a truth value, meaning any sentence that is either true or false. Saying that Canada's to the north of the United States would be a true statement. Saying it's to the south of the United States would be false, but they're both assertions. And so an assertion that can be compared against the facts is an assertoric sentence. Those are fundamental because those are the only kind of sentences that occur as premises and conclusions of arguments. Now, another type of sentence, different from the assertoric, is the interrogative sentence. Interrogative sentences, you may remember, are just questions. And so that's another part of speech and language. It's just asking questions about stuff. So any sentence that ends with a question mark is an interrogative. What day is it? When is the final? Who won the Super Bowl? These are all just questions, and those are interrogatives. There's also imperatives. Okay, so imperatives are commands and directives that are given. So write this down, get on the ground, take out the trash, do the dishes, clean your room. I don't know why I'm giving a bunch of examples of like parents and stuff, but maybe that's familiar to some of you guys because you're used to hearing things from parents telling you to do stuff. So imperatives, that's another kind of sentence. Okay, now after that, I guess we talked about what are some different premise and conclusion indicator words. So let's speak on that for a minute. Who could tell me what a conclusion indicator word is or what some of those are? Remember that a conclusion indicator word is a word that one says or writes just before they present the conclusion of their argument. So it's like when you say, here's the final result of my argument. Therefore, very good, Jordan, that's one of them. And in this case, it would read that way. John's blood was on the murder weapon. John's shoe print was found at the crime scene. Therefore, John is the killer. Okay, and others include, very good, ergo, the kind of classic Latin conclusion indicator word. Ergo, John is the killer. We could use thus, another possibility. His blood was on the weapon. His shoe print was on the crime scene. Thus, he's the killer. Hence, he is the killer. In conclusion, so he's the killer. Okay, very good. Consequently, those are all conclusion indicator words. So if you ever hear those words spoken or you see them written out, you know that someone's presenting an argument. And this information that follows after that word is whatever their conclusion was. There are also premise indicator words. These are like evidence words. These are words which mean that the following statement is evidence for something else. So who knows what some of those classic premise indicator words are? There's two big ones that I always think of in my mind, but let's see what you have. Okay, good, Jordan. There is because and there is since. Those are two premise indicator words. Due to the fact that would be another possibility. Yes, correct. And so in this case, thinking about how it would fit into the example, because John's blood was on the murder weapon and since his shoe print was found at the crime scene, therefore I conclude that John is the killer. You know, and so not the word so though, Kellen. So is yet again, it's a conclusion indicator word. So is a summary statement that you say at the end. But in enunciating the premises, you would say things like because of this, that, since this, that, due to this fact, that fact. Given this information, that follows. Okay, so given that, provided that, since, because, due to the fact that, those are all great examples, so very good. Oh no, that's fine, thanks. I just wanted to clarify one point. Okay, so now, with all that behind us and the review in place, we can move to discuss two main types of argument. Okay, so that's the real core of today's lesson and today's meeting. I'm going to try and help you guys all understand what are the two major types of argument and reasoning that exist in logic. Okay, so there are two main types. And let's clear the board so I can give you that information. So two main types of reasoning and argument. Two main types of reasoning and argument, and what they are called is deduction versus induction. Deduction, induction. We have what we call deductive arguments compared with inductive arguments. So let me begin on this side of the divider, and let's talk about what are deductive or arguments that use deduction. Okay, so a good deductive argument is labeled and termed a deductively valid argument. And that's a very fundamentally important concept in logic and critical thinking. So we're going to really make sure to be clear on this. Let me help then. Deductive validity. Okay, so we're starting with description and explanation of what deduction and deductive arguments are. A good deductive argument is labeled deductively valid argument. Deductively valid argument, okay? And so here's the definition of this. And then I'll follow up by giving examples, right? But the definition says it's deductively valid if all the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. So when that is the case, it's deductively valid. If all of the premises are true, then in that case, the conclusion must, and this word must is key, so I'm going to double underline it, must also be true. So that is our definition of a deductively valid argument. An argument is valid like so if all the premises are true, then in that case the conclusion would have to be true as well. Sometimes people just refer to such an argument as valid without the more complex jargon of deductively valid, but I'm just giving you like the full rundown of the label. Sometimes though, frequently people will just say it's a valid argument, meaning that it is deductively valid, so same thing. Okay, so again, when the argument's deductively valid, that means that if we assume that all the premises are true, then the conclusion below would have to be true as well, based on those premises. So let me just give you some little examples here, and you can see the way that this definition plays out. So say that my first premise just claims that all dogs are mammals. And then continuing from there, I say that terriers are dogs. Okay, now I think you could probably deduce this conclusion from the premises. And not to worry, Kellen, just come back when you're ready. But yeah, anyone here, let me know. What's the conclusion that follows from these two premises? All dogs are mammals. Okay, terriers are dogs. So therefore what? It's a pretty elementary piece of reasoning. But we're starting with something simple. So yeah, all dogs are mammals and terriers are dogs. So what do you think follows logically? What has to be true on the basis of that? That terriers are mammals. Very good. Okay. Okay, now I just want you to focus on this case here. This argument is valid. Why? It's valid because if these two statements are true, then there's no room for this to be false. If these two things are true, this has to logically be true as well. It's just a result, a consequence of these two pieces of information above. And that can actually be shown by means of what are called Venn diagrams. Maybe you guys have ever looked at Venn diagrams when you did some math or stats or, I don't know, some quantitative reasoning in earlier classes in your life. But sometimes we use them to display the validity or invalidity of an argument. So here, I'm going to draw this circle here that stands for the dogs. Okay, so these are dogs. This circle, let's say, stands for every single dog. It's the set of all dogs. So your dog, your friend's dog, dog you see on TV, they're all within this circle. Okay, now I'm going to draw another circle and label it M. And that's going to stand for the mammals of the world and of the universe. So if all dogs are mammals, how the first premise says, then how shall I draw the M circle to denote that on the board visually? To show that all dogs are mammals, how should the circle of M be drawn relative to this circle that shows D? Let me know. All dogs are mammals, so I'm just asking, how can I draw a circle that stands for mammals, which will represent that visually here? Just think about it and tell me what you think. Okay, so Philip, very good. The M circle should surround this circle that says D. Why? Well, because if this represents all mammals, then this just shows that all dogs are mammals, because this is a subset of the broader area shown by this mammalian circle. So like, look at this region that is outside of the realm of D, but still in this circle M. This would be all the non-dogs that are still mammals. So like human beings, lions, tigers, bears, giraffes, all these other warm-blooded, live birth creatures aside from dogs. But look, every dog is a mammal. Okay, now second premise says that terriers are dogs. So how should I draw the letter T on this graph to show that terriers are dogs? Now hopefully you're seeing what I'm drawing here, and that should not be too difficult. So where will T occur within the graph to denote premise 2? We've shown that all dogs are mammals here. Now to say that terriers are dogs, good. So the letter T, let's say, should be placed within the circle of D, standing for dogs. So say that this is all the terriers. All the terriers are dogs. All the dogs are mammals. So does the conclusion follow? Of course. This conclusion has to be true if these two premises are. And the graph makes that explicit, because based on the graph, T cannot possibly fall outside of the whole broad circle of M, because M contains within its scope D as a subset. And so since everything that's within this category is a member of this category, then any individual that falls within the circle D also falls within M. Therefore, it does conclusively follow the terriers are mammals. Okay, so that's just one example. But we're going to continue to give more examples so that you guys kind of get familiar with this. So let's do another. no president of the United States, anyway, has been a woman. There's never been a woman president. Not yet. So, second premise. Let's see. Who's a well-known, very famous woman? Maybe I'll say like Beyonce or something, right? So Beyonce is a woman. Okay, so now what conclusion would you think follows from those two statements, those two premises? It's another piece of elementary deduction. So what can be deduced from the premise that no president has been a woman and Beyonce is a woman? What follows here? Yes, very good, Joa, that Beyonce has not been the president. Okay, good. Okay, now this is again a valid argument. It's deductively valid because if these two statements are true, if these are both true premises, then that does not mean this could possibly be false. No, this has to be true if these two things are true. And again, we can do a Venn diagram that makes this perfectly clear. So say here the circle P stands for all the presidents. So who's in there? I don't know, Abraham Lincoln, Barack Obama, Jimmy Carter, JFK, Donald Trump, they're all just within this circle. Okay, so the first premise says no president has ever been a woman, and so let this other circle denote all women. Notice that there's no overlapping region here because there's never been one woman that was also a president, and there's never been a president that was also a woman. So if there was even one, then these two circles would intersect just slightly, and there'd be a member that was a member of both. But there are no members, so they're disjoint, the two sets. Now, Beyonce is a woman, so obviously you know where B should fall. It should fall over here within this circle that denotes all the women. She's one of them. So obviously from these two facts, it does logically follow that she's not been president, because how could a member of this class, which is fully disjoint from this class, also be a member of the other circle? It's not possible. So that's another deductively valid argument. I hope that in the full time, before I'm gone and everything, I hope we do see a woman president eventually, and maybe we will. But anyways, just as an example of a valid argument. Okay, let me give you another. Because here's the thing, the reason I'm giving you more than one is because I've noticed over the years that teaching deductive validity is sometimes a concept that students have to really chew on for a while, kind of think various different examples before it really fully sinks in. So I think I'm doing you a service by giving you like a multitude of examples to kind of refer the definition to. Here's maybe another one. So Tom Brady is older than Dr. Vulich, which is true. And Dr. Vulich is older than, I don't know, like Anthony Davis. You know, the Lakers basketball star, the brow. There's a clear conclusion that follows from this, a valid conclusion. So what do you say will be the conclusion in this case? Brady older than Vulich, Vulich older than Davis. So therefore, there's something pretty obvious that does result from these two. And let's see who can tell me. What is our conclusion of this valid argument? Okay, good. That Tom Brady is older than Anthony Davis. Very good. Now again, I hope you kind of get the general idea here that this argument's valid. Why is it valid? Because this conclusion has to be true if these two things are true. In other words, you hopefully see that it's not possible for Brady to be older than me older than Davis, but Brady is not older than AD. That's not possible at all, just because of the transitivity of the greater than relation. It's just like numbers, right? 9 is greater than 5, and 5 is greater than 3, so 9 is greater than 3. That's the transitivity of the greater than relation. If A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C. In any way that you could quantitatively measure things. So one way of doing it is with age. You know, if he has a number of years that's bigger than mine, and my number of years is bigger than his, then clearly Brady's number is bigger than Anthony Davis's. You see, yeah, Peachy making another cameo. She's a good girl. It's another valid argument, and we could have substituted any other quantitative measure where greater than and less than makes sense. So, like Tom Brady weighs more than me, and I weigh more than. I mean, that's going to be a tough one, but I don't know, like Kate Middleton, and therefore Tom Brady weighs more than Kate Middleton. Or in terms of height, you know, so LeBron James is taller than me. I am taller than Kevin Hart. Therefore, LeBron James is taller than Kevin Hart. And that just makes perfect sense logically, right? Here's LeBron, let's say his height. Here's mine, V, Vulic. Over here you got Kevin Hart. So if these two things are true, he's taller than me, I'm taller than him, it is no possibility that he's not taller than Kevin Hart. Okay, so just giving you a variety of examples of deductively valid arguments. And these are considered to be good arguments because if it's valid deductively, that means that on the assumption that the premises are true, the conclusion is guaranteed to be true. It's not probably, but it has to be true as well. And so when you're trying to prove something based on an argument, if the argument's valid, then if your audience accepts your premises, they have to accept your conclusion because it's just a logical result of those premises. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but I'd like to repeat it if I did. The visual look of a deductively valid argument in standard form, like you see here, where there's the conclusion below, the line, and then the premises listed above it that lead to it, it kind of reminds you of the look of old elementary mathematics problems that you might have did when you were a kid in school. So like, say, just basic addition, 2 + 2 is 4. When you have an addition problem set up on the page like this, it does have certain visual similarities to a valid argument in standard form, because at the bottom, below the line, you have the result that derives from the information and the mathematical operation above. So it's like, if these two factors are added, this has to be our consequence below. And you know, with logic, we don't necessarily deal with numbers, although we do, but we deal with also just language and parts of speech. And the same concept is applied here. The conclusion of the argument is a piece of information that has to be correct if the above information is considered correct. And so, you know, just kind of helping you to build a bridge from whatever prior understanding you may have of the deductive reasoning you do in math with the kind of overall deductive reasoning that we do in logic, okay? So that's deductive validity. Now there's one more concept of deduction that I have to also describe for you before we can move on to the other side and talk about induction. Okay, so with deduction, there's validity, as we just went through. There's also what is called soundness. Okay, what does it mean for an argument, a deductive argument, to be sound? That's now what we have to discuss. So soundness, guys. Okay, so to have a sound argument, there have to be two things. First of all, it has to be valid. So we've already now described that. So it's a valid argument, but there's one more part that's very important. It's a valid argument which has all true premises. That's when it's sound. And I understand that at first you might look at that and be like, what does this really mean? Let me explain it with some examples. The best examples to explain this point are examples where we have a valid argument, but that is not sound, okay? And that can easily happen, where the valid argument holds a conclusion that logically follows from premises, but in which the premises are not really true in reality. Okay, so like here, let me give you this quick example. All human beings have walked on Mars, you know, the planet Mars. Okay, first premise, all human beings have walked on Mars. Second premise, I don't know, we're talking about the Super Bowl, so it's in your mind. Let me just use it as an example. Tom Brady is a human being. Okay, so what conclusion do you think one would draw from those two premises? Let's disregard whether these are factually true or not, and just the information that results from these two pieces of information. What's the conclusion logically of this argument? If all human beings have walked on Mars, and furthermore, Tom Brady is a human being, then it follows that Tom Brady has walked on Mars. That's basically right. Yeah, Joe. Okay, now, very good, yes. Here's my question though. Based on what you're learning right now, all these terms, what is the status of this argument here? Tell me about this argument. First off, is it valid? Valid, yes or no? Valid or invalid? What do you think about that? This one. Consider your answer and let me know. Okay, good. Well, we're getting different answers. One says valid, one says not valid. Others? Got to break the tie. Yes, meaning that it is valid. Okay, good, Lan. Just waiting to see if I get a couple more reactions out there, and then I'll help you understand the right answer. If we are assuming it's factually true, then it's valid, deductively valid. Okay, good. It is valid, okay? Let me just tell you, it's a valid argument. Absolutely, 100%, this is valid. But if you're thinking something weird about it, it's talking about people going to Mars, well, it's got a different problem. Validity isn't the issue. It is valid because if these premises are true, then this conclusion has to be true as well. I'm pointing to the whole thing, Joa, so not just one statement within it. The overall argument is valid just based on the logic. The conclusion logically follows from the premises. But although it is valid, now here, the real takeaway that I want you guys to understand, it's valid, but it's not what? Let me know about that second part of my question. Valid, yes, but not what? That's right, Joa. It's not, wait for it, it's not sound. Correct. It's not sound. Exactly, not sound. So tell me, though, to those that seem to know the right answer, why isn't it sound? Based on the definition of soundness, what is the reason that's throwing this argument off from being sound? What part of it or piece of information deprives it of soundness? Because it is valid, but not sound, and why not? That we should be able to tell the class. Okay, yeah, correct. Philip, premise one is not true. Now, Remy, you say it isn't true, but it is a little underspecified. You want to say which premise is not true, because some of the information is true. I mean, Tom Brady is a human being. That's a true premise. But, of course, premise one is false. It says all human beings have walked on Mars. Now, is that really true? No. No human being has ever walked on Mars, including me and you. So we have a false premise here. And if even one premise is not factually correct to reality, then it's not a sound argument. But it is still valid. And why is it valid? Just because of the logical flow of information from premises to conclusion. Like here, let me give you a diagram that will show it's valid. Okay? So suppose that these are all the human beings, HB. Suppose that these are the things that have walked on Mars. I don't know, like maybe there are non-humans that have walked on Mars, Martians or other aliens or something. But it says all human beings have walked on Mars, so this diagram satisfies premise one. Now, premise two says Tom Brady's a human being, so where would I put him? Well, clearly I would place him here within the human being circle because he is a human being. Now, under these conditions, assuming these two premises to be true, does it follow that he has walked on Mars? Yes, because if all humans have walked on Mars, and he's one of the members of the category human, then he, as well as all other humans, would have walked on Mars. So the conclusion logically follows from the premises. As Anna is saying, the argument makes sense, like the conclusion you can see where it's coming from. It's coming from those premises that were stated, but it's not sound because we have an evidently false first premise. Okay, and let me see other comments if I've missed any of those. Obviously, not all humans have been to Mars. Yes. Doesn't have all true premises. Correct. Although it's valid, the first claim is not based on reality. Okay, good all around. That's all correct. So I'm helping you guys to know something, that when you have a valid argument, all you're looking at is not whether the claims are true or false. You're just looking at whether the conclusion is implied by the premises, whether the conclusion is a logical byproduct of the premises. That's all that validity asks you to judge. But soundness requires you to, on top of that, question whether the premises are really true to the facts. Okay, so in the best case scenario, every argument would be both valid and sound. But the reason that sometimes we just have validity without soundness is because some people will reason competently based on false assumptions. You know, like someone could say, you know, so suppose that the only reason to fake the moon landing is to prevent people from rebelling. And okay, so the only reason to fake the moon landing is to prevent people from rebelling. The moon landing was faked, and therefore it was done to prevent people from rebelling. That would be a valid argument, but it's assuming things that are not really true. Like it's saying that the reason to fake a moon landing would be to deceive everybody, and it also says that it was fake, which is clearly not true. But if we follow the person's logic, we could say, well, they're drawing a conclusion based on assumptions that they had, and the conclusion seems to follow from the assumptions. It's just that those are false assumptions. So because we're not omniscient gods, because we don't necessarily have perfect powers of judgment, and sometimes we make faulty assumptions about what's true and false, in many cases, the best we can do is to state an argument which is valid in form, and then leave it to our critics and opponents to judge whether we are making correct assumptions in our premises. You know, so sometimes people can make a coherent and valid argument based on wrong assumptions. If that is the case, the argument remains valid, but it is not sound. Okay, well, so Kellen, you ask, are most political arguments valid but not sound? You know, it depends, I suppose, what specific case you're mentioning. I don't like to paint with a broad brush and say all political speech and political argumentation is fallacious, invalid, or unsound. It just depends. I mean, I think that there could be truth in political argumentation in some cases at least. Like if the policy being advanced is best achieved through a certain set of procedures that we're going to adopt under the law, then I think that that could be something known and argued for. But in many cases, they might not be sound, you know, depending on the example. Like someone could say, for example, immigrants are dangerous and we all want to be safe, so therefore we should limit immigration. That could be considered a valid argument, but the first assumption and the first premise is not true. If you look at statistics, some of you may have studied this, but facts show that in terms of violent crime, the rates of commission are actually lower with people that are like newly admitted immigrants from other countries. But if you assumed that, you know, immigrants are inherently more dangerous, and you assumed that we should remain safe and free from danger, then you could draw that conclusion. It's just that it might not be based on, you know, sound premises. Okay, so I take your point, Kellen. It's good to have a valid argument, but in the ideal case, it would be sound as well. As far as life goes, we just do our best and we try to make good, valid arguments. And if they're unsound, that'll be discovered or at least adjudicated in the full course of time. Okay, so that's another example of a valid but not sound argument. Now, valid but sound, I mean, like the example I gave before, all dogs are mammals, terriers are dogs, so terriers are mammals. This is a valid argument. The conclusion logically follows from premises that are stated. But in that example, the premises are, of course, true. It's true that all dogs are mammals. It's true that terriers are a classification of dog. So it follows, but on top of it being valid, the premises are really factually true. Okay? Let me see if someone in the chat can try and generate their own example. Try to make up an argument with two premises and a conclusion and make it be valid but not sound. Let's see if anyone can do that. And I'll help you. Here's a hint. If you'd like to be like an easy method for generating valid but not sound arguments, or just valid arguments overall, is to have the first premise be a categorical statement which says all or no. Okay, that's like a good hint. So if I say like all dogs are from Alaska and terriers are dogs, so they're from Alaska, that would be a valid argument, but it's not sound. So any statement of all things of a kind have a certain feature can be used as your first premise. And you could also do it with no. Like no man has walked on Mars. I'm a man, so I have not walked on Mars. Let's see if you can come up with some valid but unsound example, just to make sure that this is coming through on your end. So when you write it in the chat, it'll be hard to do it in standard form, obviously, because of the interface that you have. So you can simply just number the premises 1, 2, and the conclusion C, and I'll see that in your typed response here. So just throwing it out, what is an example you could come up with of a valid argument, but it's not actually sound because it has some false premise, at least one? Just take a moment and let's see what you can give me. Like a false all statement would be a good way to begin, or a false no statement would be a good way to begin. Okay, so Alex, this is great. You're saying every animal can fly. Humans are animals, and therefore humans can fly. That's perfectly correct as a good example. It's valid, but it's not sound. It's valid because the conclusion is a statement that is the result of the premises. But it's not sound because it says every animal can fly, and we all know that most animals cannot fly. Nonetheless, if we assumed that they could, then the remaining statements would lead us to that conclusion. Okay? I see another case here by another student. No man has ever survived a shark attack. Well, some of them have, but let's suppose that none have. Arthur has survived a shark attack. Okay, so Arthur cannot be a man. This must be some kind of superhuman or other animal. Yeah, very good example. Except why is his name Arthur though? Is it like the character from the cartoon show kind of Arthur? Anyway, yeah, I like your example. It's valid, but it's not sound because the first premise throws it off, which says that no man has survived a shark attack, which we know there have been some cases where people have. Okay, Philip, Tom Brady kisses his son on the lips. People married to each other kiss on the lips, and therefore Tom Brady is married to his son. Okay, good. Another valid argument, but which is false. Well, in which the second premise is false. Now, you could have, to be fair though, to be a little picky. I'm sorry to say, Philip, but part of my job to be a little picky at times. You could have said that only people married to each other kiss on the lips, because just saying people leaves it a little ambiguous. I could have interpreted it to mean that some people married to each other kiss on their lips, and then that would have left room for Tom Brady and his son to be some of the people that kiss on the lips, but they're not only in the category of being married. So if you had said only people that are married to each other kiss on the lips, then the conclusion would definitely have to be correct based on those premises. Okay. Steven, I'm 9 feet tall. LeBron is 7 feet tall, so you're taller than LeBron. That's a good one. I like that example. Yeah, so it's false that he's that's false that you're 9 feet tall. It's also, LeBron's 6'8", so he's close to 7 foot, but not quite. Anyway, let's suppose that at least your first premise is false, but 9 feet is greater than 7 feet. So assuming those premises to be true, then the conclusion definitely does follow from them, but it's not sound. Jordan, every superhero has superpowers. Batman is a superhero, and therefore Batman has superpowers. Now, you're saying this is valid but not sound, and I'm wondering, is it because not every superhero has superpowers? Is that the claim? Because there are some that are just like really, like Batman is just a human. He's just Bruce Wayne, right? Is that what you're kind of thinking? I'm just trying to get in your headspace of like why you would say this is not sound. Okay, correct. Good. I understand is it Marvel Comics universe or is this DC? But anyway, yeah, cool. That makes sense. Yeah, he's one of those superheroes that just gets by on his amazing wealth and all his contraptions that he's built. Although sometimes I've seen in these films, it looks like he really gets dealt with pretty roughly and he still comes out unscathed, but he's just a normal human. Okay, and it's DC. Good. Okay, yeah, so those are all deductive arguments, and we've talked about the difference between deductively valid arguments that are sound and those that are not. So it seems like you guys are tracking that pretty well and doing pretty well. So now let's go on and talk about the Patman. Oh, is that the new? Is it in the franchise? I'm a little like not up to speed on current developments with Batman, but anyways, is it like the next installment of the film series or a new actor? I'm kind of off. You'll let me know. But let's go to the next definition while you're thinking about that. Pattinson. Okay, got you. Induction. Okay, I said there's two main types of argument. There's deduction and induction. We've talked about deduction. That's what I thought. Yeah. Good. New actor. There's deductive validity and soundness. Now, when we switch topics to induction, the other main form of reasoning and argument, here's the terminology. When you have a good inductive argument, it's not labeled inductively valid. Valid is a deductive term. With induction, the term is, it's a good argument when it's called inductively strong, okay? So here's the definition of inductively strong argument. Okay, inductively strong argument. It's the argument type where if all the premises are true, then the conclusion, it's not that it must be true, but now with induction, rather, it's that it's likely, it's probably, highly likely to be true. Okay, so if all of the premises are true, then, in that case, the conclusion is highly likely to be true. Okay, there you see the definition, and now let me follow that up with some explanation. So the main difference between deductive arguments and inductive arguments is that with deduction, if it's valid, the conclusion has to be true, assuming that the premises are. With induction, instead of us saying that the conclusion must be true, has to be true if the premises are, it's a little weaker than that. It's rather saying that it's most likely true. It's highly likely to be, but with induction, unlike deduction, there's always some possible room for the conclusion to turn out false, even if all the premises are true. So with induction, the premises establish that the conclusion is very likely, that it's highly probable, but it never establishes that it must be the case. It just probably would be. So let me give you some different examples of inductively strong arguments, and that will hopefully clarify the definition even more. Okay, so hopefully you're able to write that down. Maybe I can put it in the chat just in case it didn't come out. Sorry. Induction, yes, it's found in scientific theories. That's true. It's like the main form of reasoning that's used in scientific research. Of all the terms are true, like okay. So there's just the definition in the chat so that you can refer to it as I'm writing these examples. Now, here's like a textbook example of an inductively strong argument. Literally textbook, because in a lot of logic textbooks, when induction is described, this is like a core example that is given, but we'll spin off other ones after this. So, okay, here's this premise. It just says that the sun has come up every morning for a long time, for not just a year, not just for a decade, not just for a century, but for literally billions of years. Since the planet Earth, we know through carbon dating that it's billions of years old, and the sun, of course, predates that. So the sun has come up every morning for literally billions of years. Okay, so suppose that we just have that one simple premise right there. What very likely, highly probable conclusion do you think a person might infer from that evidence? The sun has come up every single morning for billions of years without fail, and therefore one may conclude that what? Let me see if you can give me that in the chat there. Sun has come up every morning for billions of years. So what? So therefore, conclusion what? Okay, very good, Nathan. So conclusion that the sun will come up. Well, you say this morning. It's already a little later in the day. So let's speak about tomorrow, right? The sun will come up tomorrow. Okay, now let's just focus on this example for a moment. This conclusion that the sun will come up tomorrow, it's extremely probable, isn't it? I mean, it's very probable, but what are we basing it on? We're not basing it on literally nothing, like who knows, it's just a guess. It's clearly based on solid evidence that traces back so far into the past. So based on this track record, it seems pretty likely, doesn't it, that the sun will come up tomorrow. Joa, not a problem when it's one premise. I mean, an argument can have at a minimum one premise. In many cases, in most, there's more than one. I just made this one very simple, but decent question. I'm just saying, like, one premise doesn't disqualify it from being an argument. It's only no longer an argument if there's literally 0 premises. So this makes the cut because it just has one. But if we wanted to, we could have made this into more than one premise. We could have said the sun came up, you know, 1 billion years ago. It came up 500 million years ago. It came up 100 million years ago. You know, we could state the dates, but I've just simplified them into one, streamlined into one sentence. But that's okay. So way you put it, we have no reason to believe it won't come up tomorrow there. It's a little almost too minimalist. I mean, it's not just that we don't have reason to believe it won't. We have very good reason to believe that it will, because this is a pattern that has been durable for so long in time. And when you have long-standing patterns that have persisted throughout time in the past, inductively strong arguments will just give that as the evidence and then conclude that the pattern will persist into the next observable instance. Okay, so this is considered to be extremely strong because this conclusion is based on a lot of previous data. Nonetheless, despite that, this conclusion cannot absolutely be guaranteed, even if all of the sun has always come up in the past, right? Maybe tonight will be the last night that the sun does come up, because overnight it'll get destroyed by a passing meteor, or maybe the planet Earth will get destroyed by some passing giant meteor or comet, and then there won't be any surface from which to observe the so-called sun rising as we orbit around it in our planetary motion. So we hope those things don't happen. Maybe the sun could supernova. I mean, eventually it will exhaust its fuel and it'll just engulf the local solar system when it explodes outward. But we have a lot of good reasons to think that it won't happen tomorrow, for example. So although this is highly likely, the induction aspect of the argument means we can't 100% guarantee it. Maybe it's 99.9999% probable that it will come up tomorrow, but it's not tomorrow yet. So we're just making a reasonable prediction based on observation of the past. Why the double negative? I see you guys are talking, so let me get to that. Can we say people can't never live in the dark? I don't know what you really mean though, Ryan. People can live in the dark, but if there was no sun, it wouldn't just be a question of not having light. There would also be no warmth. It would be frozen solid. So I mean, you're maybe suggesting an alternative conclusion or something. It's just an odd example to mention. People can live in the dark, but they couldn't live without the heat and photosynthesis processes that the sun does provide. So I mean, you know, if there was no sun, there wouldn't be any life. Anyway, that's a little bit to the side and not necessarily 100% on point. The example I'm giving you is just an example of an inductively strong argument. And let me just try and make sure you understand the pattern and the form that these arguments take. The premises of an inductively strong argument will usually cite some pre-existing pattern that we've observed before. And then the conclusion will just state that that same pattern will continue into the next case that we could watch. Here, let me give you more examples. Me, I'm in my 30s, and I've never broken a bone, ever, so far, okay? So, knock on wood, hope it never happens. But let me make an argument for you. I've not broken a single bone in over 30 years of life. So, therefore, I won't break a bone today, okay? Now, doesn't that seem pretty probable? If I've got that much life experience, and it doesn't seem like I'm breaking such bones at all throughout this entire duration of life, then it stands to reason that I probably won't break one today either. But I cannot guarantee, and nor can you, that something random won't happen which breaks this pattern. So with inductively strong arguments, the premises establish a very likely conclusion, but not something that can be absolutely guaranteed. It remains possible for it to turn out false, even if highly unlikely to do so. What do you mean, Philip, with this comment? Isn't that an almanac? Oh, well, it's not only about weather, okay? Like, it's not just this narrow example. I just mentioned a different case, me breaking a bone, nothing to do with weather. Let me give you some other thoughts, some other examples too. Take the United States, right? Every single United States president has been a man. That's 30, 40 years of US history. So every single election has been won by a man, a presidential election. Every US president has been a man, so somebody might make what conclusion from that? So therefore, one could infer that what? I'm just trying to mix up the examples, right? We started with the sun. I talked to you about me not breaking bones. Now I'm going into US history and the pattern that has existed so far, which is that every president's been male. So you could obviously then conclude, okay, good, Joe, that the next president will be a man as well. Well, when you have such a pattern in history, and there's never been one exception to it, it seems likely. It's likelier than not. But can it be guaranteed? Absolutely no. I mean, there are some viable women candidates, and Hillary was pretty close, actually, in 2016. So, you know, one could argue that this pattern will continue, but once again, since it's inductive, despite the long track record and historical background, it remains a possibility that the pattern will change and will be upset. As an example of that, just another, prior to the election of Obama, while we're on the subject of US presidents, you could have said that every president so far has been a white man. And that was true, of course, all the way through George Washington up till George W. Bush. But if you had said, while Obama was running against John McCain, every president has been white, so this next president will be white, it might have been a probable conclusion based on the pattern, but of course Obama broke that historical precedent and pattern that had existed before him. So I'm mentioning these cases just as a reminder that we have to rely on induction, and all of us do that every day. You have to have some expectation of what things will happen based on what you've already observed and witnessed in the previous time of the past. But again, induction, as much as we need it and as much as we do rely on it for everyday and for scientific reasoning, it's never an ironclad guarantee that the conclusion of your inductively strong argument will turn out to be true. It's probably going to turn out true, but it remains a possibility that it could still be false. Athletic performance. Did I say this? Tom Brady's made the playoffs for 20 years or something, so he'll make the playoffs next year. You would think, having seen that kind of record, that it's probable. But eventually, you could argue, well, something else could happen. He could get injured. He could have an off season or whatever. So I'm just giving you a random assortment of inductively strong arguments. Let me see if any of you can hit me with your own examples, okay? So who here thinks they can state a reasonable inductively strong argument? Keeping in mind that we already are in the habit of thinking inductively, we just haven't been taught the terminology before. But like when you walk out of your apartment or house today, I bet you're not going to be looking all around for snipers, right? Because you've never been sniped or shot in your life. So, if you've never dealt with that kind of emergency situation in 20 years, then you don't think it'll happen today. But of course, anything can happen to a person. You get into your car and you turn the key. What do you think will happen? That your car will start. Why do you think that? Because maybe in 5, 10 years, however long you've had it, it's always started every time you turn the key. So you believe it'll happen again today. But a mechanical failure or something random could cause you to be surprised by the lack of fulfillment of that conclusion. Here we see Joa, my neighbor drinks coffee every day, and therefore you're concluding that my neighbor likes coffee. Okay, I mean, I guess you'd say it's a probable conclusion. If he's drinking it every day, doesn't a person assume that he likes that? But I guess it's a possibility that he could just be drinking it strictly for the caffeine effects or something, and he does not really like the flavor. Actually, I know people like that. It's kind of I get frustrated with my own brother, but Danny and David, these guys don't really drink coffee, and I'm constantly trying to get them into it because it's good stuff, but they just like the effect it has waking them up in the morning. Okay, anyway, Ryan, you never got a traffic ticket, therefore you won't get one tomorrow. That's good. Here's one thing I could suggest when you're presenting arguments like this. If it's inductive, it's a good thing to mention sometimes the length of time that the pattern has existed when you mention those premises. Because you say you never got a traffic ticket. Well, what if you got your license last week? Then that wouldn't really be too much of a record to base your conclusion on. But if you say I've never gotten a traffic ticket in however many years, 5 years, 10 years of driving, then the longer that pattern has been, the likelier and stronger the conclusion would be. Does it make sense? So just one point. Elizabeth, never been in a car accident. Okay, and it's the same kind of comment I would make to Ryan. You might specify the length of life that you've had, if this was a toddler saying this or something, I mean, they're not very precocious or verbal, but they wouldn't have had a very long life yet, so it wouldn't have been as much evidence. It's been cloudy for a week. It'll be cloudy tomorrow. Yeah, a week is not like the most long-standing time period, but it still makes sense. You're in the midst of cold weather period, so you think it'll continue. How about it's been warm weather in Costa Mesa every summer for the past, since we've recorded weathers, hundreds of years. So there will be a warm summer this year. Okay, it seems probable, unless some freak weather circumstances materialize and it's snowing in the summer, but we don't think that's likely. Your friend has got COVID once and he'll never get it again. I think that might actually not be the strongest argument. First of all, there are all these new variants of the virus that are taking root in the United States and around the world. Some of them have shown the potential for reinfection. And the virus itself, there's no evidence yet to show that the antibodies that you build when you get it make you immune for the remainder of your life. So that's still being studied. Nonetheless, you could formulate an argument like that, but I think I would need to be a little more, you'd have to be a little more careful about the presentation of the premises and so on. Remy, Dr. Vulich teaches on Tuesdays, therefore he will teach next week on Tuesday. Okay, good. Here's the only thing I would say about this. So far we've had 2 weeks together, and so it's a little early in the semester for you to make clear enough predictions about my punctuality and attendance record. But I'll just tell you this as a fact. I've not missed a single lecture in like 6 years for any reason, illness, emergency, scheduling conflicts. So, looking at that record, Dr. Vulich hasn't missed any class lectures for 6 years. Therefore, he will not miss lecture on Thursday. I mean, that's pretty probable. But, if some emergency thing happens to me between now and Thursday, then I'll be surprised, and so will you, that the inductively strong argument didn't lead you to your correct conclusion. Ben has never murdered anyone in his life, so he most likely won't murder anyone tomorrow. Okay, good. You use a fictional character, Ben, and you don't mention the length of his lifespan, but those points aside, I definitely understand the kind of argument you give. Here's one, just real story. You guys want to know this? I had a bike for many years. For 15 years, I had this amazing, classic, fixed gear, heavy metal frame Schwinn bike from the old 1970s, and it was a Schwinn Collegiate. These are rare bikes, okay? So I kept it on my balcony just for years, and never ever was this bike touched, stolen, or anything tampered with. One day last year, randomly, I come back from teaching, and it was gone. So someone had jacked my bike from my own property. And, my thought process was, I'm so surprised. I've had this bike for 15 years, never really locking it up, just leaving it on my premises, and it had never been stolen, so I would think it wouldn't be stolen today. Just showing you again that although induction gives you a basis to have a reasonable belief with high probability, we're still dealing with probabilities, and that's not something that can be absolutely guaranteed. Alex, there's water on Mars, therefore there's life on Mars. I don't know. The existence of water by itself is not, I think, clear enough evidence to make your conclusion totally likely or more probable than not. I think there are also some moons of some of the outlying planets that contain frozen ice. And the conditions for life do require perhaps some water, but a lot of other things besides. So it's in the ballpark, but I would say it could be stronger with more evidence. Now, let me say this. With induction and inductive strength, a big difference between that and deductive validity is that deductive validity is just all or nothing. It's either valid or it's invalid. This conclusion either must be true based on the premises or it's not logically implied by the premises. But with induction, strength is a matter of degree. It's not like a light switch on or off. It's more like a dimmer, brighter or more dim. And so you can imagine some arguments have greater inductive strength than others do, depending on how extensive the track record is that's cited or how likely the conclusion is that's based on them. So if I say to you that I haven't missed a day for being sick in 5 years, that's 5 years of time, and that's a pretty good pattern that's established. But if another person says they haven't missed a day in 20 years, maybe their conclusion that they wouldn't miss the next meeting would be even stronger. Maybe this thing about the sun always coming up, and therefore it'll come up tomorrow, is a lot stronger than if I say, Tom Brady won the Super Bowl this year, so he'll win it again next year. Because it's taking less information and less evidence from the past to base that future conclusion on. So I'm just saying with strength, it's something that can be more or less. The stronger arguments are going to have a tighter connection between the premises and the conclusion and a more extensive range of facts that give support to the inductively based conclusion. Now, there can also be inductively weak arguments. Those would be inductive arguments where the conclusion is not even very probable or likely, even if the premises are true. So, say for example, I told you, hey, I found $5 yesterday on the ground when I was just walking around in my neighborhood. So therefore, I'll find $5 again tomorrow when I walk around in my neighborhood. This would not be a very strong argument because it's drawing evidence from a previous experience, but it's just a one-time random experience with no likelihood of repeating. Anybody who finds money on the ground, you know that that's usually a lucky and very rare occurrence. It doesn't happen with any reliable regularity. So when you have an inductive argument, they're not all equally strong. That one would be very weak, saying that just because I happened to find money on the ground yesterday, I'll find it tomorrow. That's not a very good reason to think that you'll find it tomorrow. On the other hand, if you found money on the street every day for a solid year, that'd be a whole different scenario, and then we might say something is going on and it does seem probable that it will happen again. Traffic. When I get on the 405 at noon, heading north, there's traffic every day. There has been for 5 years, so there will be traffic if I do that tomorrow at the same time, and on and on and on, okay? So today's meeting has really just focused on the definition and difference between inductive arguments and deductive arguments. So just a kind of last review. With deduction, we have deductively valid arguments, and we also have what are called sound arguments. With deductive validity, if the premises are true, there's no room for the conclusion to be false, and it has to be true as well. And with deductively sound arguments, that means that it's both valid, so the conclusion follows from those premises, but also the premises are really true facts, okay? So you can have sound arguments, but you can also have valid arguments that are not sound. Like those cases I mentioned, every human was born on Mars, everybody has visited Canada, and therefore you've visited Canada because you're a person. It would be a valid but not sound argument. Okay, and then induction, just the last thing we closed with here. Inductive arguments, when they're strong, they provide premises that lead to a very probable conclusion. The premises establish that this conclusion has high likelihood or probability. But again, as I would remind you, the conclusion of an inductively strong argument remains possibly false despite the evidence given by the premises. That doesn't mean they're bad arguments, though. I mean, we have to rely on something, right? So what do you expect to happen tomorrow or next year or in the world or in your country? You expect whatever to happen that has basically happened in the past. And so if we didn't have any kind of insight into what to expect, we'd be constantly at a loss. What's going to happen when I walk out my door? What's going to happen when I turn the key of the car? I have no idea. It's all just a guessing game. No, we do have facts and evidence that we can form reasonable conclusions from. But again, with induction, the conclusions cannot be guaranteed, even if they are probable. Okay, guys, so I mean, that's really everything I guess I had for us today. So we can close a few minutes earlier than 3:45, but let's be back on Thursday at 2:20 again. And we're going to continue to work with the notion of deductive validity on Thursday. We're going to speak about 4 different types of deductively valid arguments. So you're going to learn about the forms of deductively valid syllogism, as we call it, and that'll become clear on Thursday. I'm going to also assign the first homework then, and that will be due in a week, next week, Thursday. So hang on for the details of the first homework. It's going to have to do with the different types of deductively valid argument that we'll learn about on Thursday. So make sure to continue following through the syllabus. There's some pages listed for the meetings this week. Try to read those if you can, and you should be in good shape for our Thursday meeting. So is everyone good to go? If so, let me know in the chat. And then I guess I'll just call it once I see your response back, making sure that we're all still here together at the end. Okay, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Everybody else that's here, I hope you're having a good day and a good week. Take it easy, stay safe and healthy. I will see you guys back on Thursday. So, Brittany, you bought the 4th edition. That's totally good, no problem. But I would ask, can you email me so that I can send you a copy of a syllabus which has the pages that you want? The page numbers are slightly different between the 4th and the 5th edition. The information's the same, pages are a little different. So if you send me that email, I can forward you a copy of an old syllabus that shows the correct pages for your 4th edition. Okay? All right, everybody. Take care. If anyone needs anything between now and Thursday, just email me and I'll be in touch. So, okay. Have a good one then. And until next time. I'm signing off. Thanks.